Texas is one of many states to have a stand your ground law. But our next story illustrates, just like so many cases before it, this is a defense not afforded to black people. It's a case we introduced to you last week. Marvin Guy is charged with capital murder in the killing of a Killeen police officer during a raid where police executed a no-knock warrant on his home in the middle of the night. The warrant accused Guy of having drugs, but none were found. Guy has been held in jail on $4 million of bond, waiting to go to trial for 8 years now. A march in Austin demanding Guy's release and dismissal of the charges against him is scheduled to be held this weekend. With me to discuss is journalist Clay Thorp, who's been reporting on this case since the very beginning. Clay, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You've been covering this case from the start, and I'd imagine you've built a rapport with Marvin, and I'm told that you spoke with him just yesterday. Can you tell us more about that conversation?
Sure. Marvin is very distrustful of the justice system. He is, trying to keep his head up, trying to stay happy, trying to stay positive amid something that's really troubling in his life. And, he's just really wanting justice and still wants there to be a trial as soon as possible. He's still waiting and still trying to keep his spirits up.
Now, it's been 7 years, almost 8 now. What brought this case to your attention initially?
So I was a hungry reporter back in 2014. I got out of journalism school and started covering crime and government at newspapers across Texas. And I was in Killeen at the right place at the right time. Marvin's case was one of the major felony cases on the docket. And as the crime and courts reporter for the newspaper, it was my job to watch that case like a hawk. And, that was probably the biggest felony case, in a long time. A police officer was killed during a no-knock raid. And I wanted to know more about the case beyond what was available publicly at the time. And so I really wanted to interview Marvin, and that's exactly what I did. I reached out to Marvin via mail, and we started corresponding, and I started visiting him as often as possible via video conference. Every opportunity that I could. I was in the courts a lot, and I tried to hear Marvin's story and hear what he had to say. And, we developed a sort of friendship, I would like to think, over the course of those years. And still to this day, we talk a lot. But, at the time, I was very much trying to get access to Marvin so that our readers and the public could understand what was happening with the case, so the readers could have more information about the case. And, very early on in the case, there was a gag order placed. And, that made my job a lot more difficult, right? Attorneys would not talk to me about this case. Any lawyer who came anywhere near the case wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't speak to me, on or off the record. And so there was definitely a lot of questions that arose, and questions in my mind, and questions still to this day.
Well, Clay, how long had Marvin been sitting in jail before you reached out?
Not very long. So he had been in jail probably less than a year, if I remember correctly.
And I asked that, Clay, because initially, Marvin being in jail and not being able to afford bond is pretty common. So I'm curious to know what made you want to look into this case even more. Had he been in jail for a number of years? Because typically, again, there's no alarms that really go off. But you say that his attorneys were reluctant to talk to you. How many attorneys do you know of that's been assigned to his case?
Oh gosh, there's been probably close to a dozen assigned to his case, right? He started out with public defenders. There was 2 or 3 of those, and they didn't last long. Marvin does not trust his attorneys. He doesn't trust the judicial system right now. And he quickly fired those 2 attorneys and hired some more out of Waco. And it wasn't very long before those 2 were out of a job. Marvin, feels like his attorneys are supposed to be working for him and are supposed to be doing the legal work that he wants them to do. And,
Right.
Marvin has had a lot of time to sit and to read and to study the law. And so he's fired a lot of lawyers, okay? And that's really contributed to, at times, right, why this has gone on so long, right? He's trying to get this to trial. Marvin wants this to get to trial as much as anyone else. And when his attorneys don't do that for him, he fires them.
Right, and you know what? Anybody in Marvin's position who's been in as long as he has would have already folded and taken a plea, and that speaks to, his fight. Clay, people have compared Marvin's case to that of another Texas case where a white man out of Burleson County shot and killed a deputy in 2013 during a surprise raid at his home. Now, he was initially charged with capital murder, but his attorney argued before a grand jury that his client was acting in self-defense, so the murder charge was dropped. Why does self-defense seem to only work when it's applied to cases not associated with black people?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I think that there are definitely some disparities in the way that we treat African American males and people of color in this country. And I don't think that I think the evidence is there, right? We have, and there was more cases than that, right? Where these suspects shot and sometimes killed police officers during no-knock raids. And because they feared for their lives and the police did not announce themselves, grand juries in Texas, a very Second Amendment friendly state, did not indict these suspects. And, that really is one of the alarm bells that went off immediately, right? The fact that Mr. Mcgee had not been indicted after shooting and killing a police officer with an AK-47, right? That really is all the proof I need to know that there is still a lot of systemic racism in this judicial system, especially in Texas.
And Mr. Mcgee had drugs. They found drugs during that raid, whereas with Marvin Guy, they did not. Okay, so last question, Clay. There's a march scheduled for this Saturday in Austin, Texas, hosted by the Grassroots Law Project and Elmer Geronimo Pratt Gun Club. What sort of turnout is expected, and do you think this will help bring Marvin home quicker?
I don't know if it will help bring home Marvin quicker. What I do hope it does is I hope that it brings the no-knock warrants to a larger audience, and to change will come at the state level, right? That's ultimately what needs to happen. Not just on no-knock warrants, but a whole host of, things that occur in Texas. Qualified immunity, implicit bias training needs to be mandated statewide for police departments across Texas. It should have happened a long time ago, right? And the fact that we are just now seeing this groundswell of support for Marvin, marching in Austin for Marvin, and it's really good, and not it's coming from a gun club, right? A Second Amendment gun club. This whole case really crosses the political divide in this way, right? Between the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment, right? Very conservative folks in this state believe that if someone comes through their door without announcing themselves, unwanted and unannounced, you're liable to get shot in this state. And it's an unfortunate loss of life on both sides. Officer Dinwiddie and his family deserve justice, but Marvin deserves justice too, and he deserves to have a trial.
Journalist Clay Thorp, thank you so very much for your time and for bringing attention to this case. Thank you.